Alright, so when we first come in, it's not too bad at the surface, but of course when you look down there, there's a lot of cables, but I tend to swap things in and out all the time. In my opinion, cable management is meant for elitists who don't change their physical setup very frequently. But this is highly functional, even though it might not look like it at first. So I got my main computer, of course, which I control with a trackball. I often get RSI type symptoms and it's extremely painful. So I switched to a trackball and it feels so much better, let me tell you. So what you see in here is my primary computer. And I also have a secondary one on top of it, which is an Intel NUC. And the way I view my Intel NUC is I open up the camera app on Windows 10, which is really bizarre, but I have a capture card and then I just do this instead of switching monitor inputs or something like that. It's a lot more handy and it works for most of my needs. So nowadays I realize I can connect my second monitor to pass through the capture card in a matter of seconds, because I can just take the HDMI from my main system to the card in 10 seconds or less behind my desk. Since the capture card has somewhat high latency, I will pass through the monitor when I don't want to deal with that latency, particularly when editing videos like this one. Just janky, but I can't complain too much. I also use Barrier, and now I'm controlling the Intel NUC. I just went all the way over to the right. So that's my Intel NUC, which is hooked up via a mirror box capture card. And I just open this up as needed, and you'll see I got my work computer right there. That's my MacBook, which is also connected. If I want to use that instead, then I just go over to here, which is my HDMI switcher, switch over to the Mac, and then inside my desk I also have a USB switcher. You're probably wondering why I have a separate HDMI and USB switcher and not like a KVM switch that unifies all that. Well, that's primarily because I got this years before I got the USB switcher. It used to be for TV inputs, but it doesn't work well with 4K, so I just stole it from a family because it works fine with 1080p. So it works fine for me. So now I got that switched over to the MacBook. There's a cord that goes from here all the way to my MacBook, which is this one right there. I have it plugged in all the time. So now that I have those switched to the correct thing, I should be able to wake up my Mac, and then there's my Mac screen. Then I use the same keyboard. I used to have two separate keyboard and mice, but this USB switcher allows me to unify that into one, which is perfect. So I could use my Mac as needed. And then that third source is for my server. Yes, I have a server as well, which is primarily used for my home lab. So then I just switch over to the third source, and then that's the USB source for the server. And I can turn it on. And then as you can imagine, that'll pop up on here as well. I don't have to switch any monitor sources. It works perfectly. So yeah, can't complain about this setup too much. And then my work computer, I just use that like a normal laptop. And when I need the keyboard and mouse, then I just simply move this cord into this laptop, and then just like that I'm controlling the laptop. So this USB switcher, the way I have it organized, I don't have anything labeled, but the rightmost one is my primary computer, which I built about 8.5 years ago. And then the rest of the computers are physically going from right to left. So like my Mac, that's the rightmost thing. Or if I have it hooked up to my work computer, that's still the rightmost computer. I often hook it up to the Raspberry Pi as well if I want to do something with that. And this webcam is there because I'm using it as a microphone. This Raspberry Pi is primarily used for my custom voice assistant, Mycroft, and I could use that to control any of my computers in pretty much any way possible. because I could execute SSH commands and do whatever I want pretty much. So I was just messing with it, but I wasn't using the mic, so that's why it's disconnected at the moment. I have another Raspberry Pi that I may use here too sometimes, but I can hook this up to there. This is still the rightmost computer. And then the Intel NUC is kind of in the middle of all the other computers besides the primary one, so therefore that'll be this one. Then the server is the leftmost one. FYI, this is what's on the server screen right now. It's running XCP&G, which is what I use for my home lab and virtualized environment. So yeah, also another reason why I have the HDMI and USB completely separate from each other is because sometimes I want to be on one device displayed, but I want to control a different device. Like in this instance, I'm literally waiting for something to happen. So I may end up doing stuff on my primary computer while I'm waiting. So yeah. Then of course I have a Stream Deck, which I primarily use for videos, but sometimes I use it as somewhat of a macro pad too. Like for example, I got a color picker on there, so if I want to see what color this cursor pixel is, that's not the right word, but you know what I mean. That's the color right there. Or if I want to see what color this is here. So I have a nice color picker, and then this is the mouse XY coordinates. So I get a live feed of that at any given time as well. That's pretty handy to have just on some screen that's not my monitor. I also control my Philips Hue lights sometimes, so I could just, might be a little hard to see, but I can turn them on with that. I can go to 69% brightness because that's what I always use. It's perfect, sets the mood, everything. Then I can set it to any color, which I rarely use it for colors nowadays, but I got all these different presets. This 100% I believe also does a white color temperature, because if I have it all the way up, that's gonna be 6500K. That's how I always use it. But most of the time I prefer to go to the warm color temperature at 69%. It's perfect for everything. And then I obviously use it for videos and stuff. This is on a whole different profile from the videos, but yeah, I definitely like that. So I have it asleep most of the time. If I need to quickly adjust the volume while I'm on a whole different computer, then I use this, and I can adjust my volume, which is pretty nice. Nowadays, I tend to use both capture cards simultaneously with my two most common devices because I have the luxury, and most of the time I'm not using it for something else. I also added a Stream Deck button to quickly switch between those cards on the camera app. It basically uses auto hotkey to bring the camera app in focus if it's not already, and then it just presses the camera switch button. The Stream Deck button's handy if my USB is switched to another device and I can't press it with the keyboard and mouse. It's much more convenient than switching and possibly having HDMI disconnect during that switch on the switcher. In some situations, the disconnect is inconvenient. Other times, it doesn't matter. Either way, I like this much better than purely using the switcher on just one capture input. So the cabling behind is obviously an embarrassing mess, but that's because I'm switching things in and out at pretty much all times, so I don't bother with cable management. It's a waste of time if you're constantly switching things in and out. And even in here, it's a bit of a mess too. So obviously this USB switcher is physically hooked up to all these different machines, including the Mac over there. So for my primary computer, I have this short USB cable which goes to this USB hub. I often like to connect a second pair of headphones, so that goes in here. I wear hearing aids, so I use this device which wirelessly streams directly to my hearing aids. It's quite handy to have because I could just leave it at all times. I don't have to think about turning it on and off, and yeah. I was using optical audio, but for some reason stereo mix doesn't like that. And I use stereo mix because sometimes I use two headphones simultaneously for a secondary person, and I use stereo mix to mimic the output from this device to this port as well. And I don't even have to use any special software for that, which is nice. I use Audio Router, which I used to use back in the day, but it glitches out in the modern day for some reason, so I just use Audio Router for the sound levels to control them individually. Otherwise, stereo mix controls the output to both devices simultaneously, and it doesn't work with optical audio, which kind of sucks. But I don't really notice how much of a difference between that and 3.5mm jack, so that works pretty nice. Then as far as my speakers go, I've been kind of just putting it away over the years. Now my speakers are actually inside of here. This is like a mini network closet, and my speakers are just kind of shoved in there right next to the network switch. If I need to use them, then here's actually the cord for my speakers. I just plug one end into here and then hook this to there, then my speakers are hooked up. This is a much more convenient solution than what I was doing before. And in case you were wondering, this cable that connects the keyboard and mouse is a USB extension cable. I have that hooked up to here, and this is wrapped up using a reusable zip tie because it's just more convenient, and this cord isn't quite long enough on its own, so I have that hooked up to an extension cable, and that works pretty nice. I also have a wireless charger right there for my phone. I can just set my phone on top of it. It's really nice. And I have it hooked up to my Intel NUC rather than the wall because I want my phone to charge more slowly so that I can preserve the life of the battery over the years. It just doesn't charge as quickly. That prolongs the life of the battery from my understanding. And so far it seems to, of all the years I've had the phone. I will also mention that I built my server from scratch just months ago, and I haven't had a chance to set it up with my home lab environment yet. This is a cable tester, by the way. You could test all sorts of interfaces like Ethernet, USB, S-Video, HDMI, RCA, and all sorts of stuff. And the lights will kind of tell you how each individual wire is hooked up, and then you can see if the wiring is good. I found some bad cables using the tester, so it's pretty interesting. I could put a link in the description if you like to check it out. But it can test individual strands inside of a cable, make sure they're all hooked up correctly. HDMI has a surprising amount compared to everything else. But anyway, I'll put a link in the description. Right here we got my blue light blockers, which I like to use at nighttime. And my desk obviously looks like a mess. This is a SATA to USB adapter. I got another one right there because I use them all the time. And this also kind of helps prove that I swap things in and out, because this is something that I do relatively frequently depending on my situation. This is setting something up for a specific circumstance that I'm literally not even going to use tomorrow. So yeah, that's kind of how janky things are around here. Also, when I render my videos, I only do it on this Mac because, in my opinion, it's a far superior experience to Windows. DaVinci Resolve, in my experience, is just way more stable on the Mac. Windows, it just crashes all the time. It could be my hardware configuration, but I just think Mac is generally more stable, like not only with Final Cut, but also DaVinci Resolve. So I do pretty much all my editing on here. I also like using ProRes to export a video and then process it in Handbrake to minimize generational quality loss. So I often use a SATA to USB and hook it up there to this hub as well. And then I could just set it up using the camera app and let it run in the background while I'm doing other stuff, which is pretty neat. So yeah, my home lab server isn't entirely set up yet because I've been kind of using it as a Secondary test rig. I like to use my Intel NUC with a primary setup, plus if I want to test out an operating system or I want to quickly use gparted while I'm in Windows, then I can just hook this SATA to USB adapter up and go to gparted while I can stay in Windows on my main machine. I have Linux on here as well, but I primarily use Windows because most of my stuff is there and I just don't have the time to make the full switch to Linux. I'm also a believer in using the right tool for the right job, and for me, Windows is the right tool most of the time. But I generally use Windows, Mac, and Linux on a daily basis because anything that's the right tool for a given job can fluctuate at any given time. You'll also probably notice, if you look back here, there's an Ethernet cable that's not even hooked up to anything at all, that yellow one. That's because it's hooked up to the server, but I only have 8 ports on my Ethernet switch, so I kind of temporarily swap out cables with other ones, so I don't have to go behind my desk and disconnect one. I just use a different cable and leave that one alone until I need it again. That's my Philips Hue bridge, by the way. This I could probably throw out because it's a broken pair of sunglasses. Honestly, let's do that now. Alright, we're set now. So yeah, I got my old phone here, Steam controller, which I love using sometimes, especially if I'm in bed and I want to watch a video on the computer. Very nice for that. Or if I'm on the couch, the Steam controller, in my opinion, beats the keyboard and mouse like 99% of the time if you have the right button mappings. My pencils and stuff used to be on my desk, but I keep knocking it over all the time, so I just put it in here instead. And I'm out of ports on my gigabit switch, so instead of getting a gigabit switch with more ports, I decided why not spend like 10 times more on the server, which gives me 4 more ports. The logic just makes a lot of sense, doesn't it? Also, a lot of times when I need to mess with my Intel NUC, matter of fact, once that Macrium job is complete that I'm currently running on here, which is separate from this one, these are 2 completely different jobs for different purposes because that's how much I do these types of things. When I'm done with that, I'm literally going to be taking the SATA drive out of the Intel NUC. Unfortunately, these SATA to USB adapters are not very reliable. I have 3 of them and they have reliability issues because there doesn't seem to be any reliable brands anywhere. So I'm using raw SATA because I just don't trust it. I use it for some situations like rendering videos because I can check if it's reliable or not by checking if the video is good or corrupt. And it works most of the time if it's hanging at the right angle. Otherwise it keeps kicking in and out and the device keeps reattaching itself over and over, which sucks. So that means I'm going to be taking the Intel NUC out in looks like about 3 hours, and then I'm going to take the drive out and stuff like that. So when I need to access stuff back there, I just take this drawer right out. And then I can get easy access to everything. Then I just put the drawer back in as needed. It's a bit of a janky setup, but it works really well. So, can't complain there. I have a webcam, as you can imagine, too. Sometimes I like to have the green screen up as well, so you'll see that I have a 11 outlet power strip. That's what the term is. And I'm using pretty much all but one. If I want to hook up the other Raspberry Pi, that's probably what that port's going to be used for. Or a lamp, I don't know. But if I have my green screen up, then I tend to put a hamper cover on top of my monitors. And I can set a camera on there that works well with the green screen. And then I grab a second power strip, which I have right here. And then I can hook up my camera, which goes to another capture card, as well as all the lights that I use for the green screen. I have a light on my desk which helps light me up, and then I have lights behind me where the green screen would be, and then that works pretty well. So if I need additional ports, then I just do that. on top of this, but I don't need this most of the time. So I have a standing desk too, by the way, in case you haven't been able to tell. Use that for about 95% of what I do. But I have this while my standing desk is up, and then when I'm not using this, I just take this right out and put it away, and that works pretty well. This is a janky but highly functional setup, as you can see. My breaker can handle about 1,875 watts, I believe, and I'm just shy of that, so as long as I stay under, I'm good, like throughout this whole room. And that's assuming that I actually max everything out. So like I have a 750 watt in that computer. It could go up to that. The Intel NUC can go up to about 100 watts. Same with my laptop. And then the server is a 500 watt, which is more than I need most of the time. So yeah, if I max those things out, then I'm just shy of it, but I won't most of the time. Another thing that I used to do back in the day before I had this whole HDMI capture card set up as a virtual monitor is I would often have my Mac right here when I was editing a video and manually hook up the keyboard and mouse. Oh, by the way, with the mouse, another nice thing is these buttons right here. I often use it to quickly hit the back button or close out an application, depending on which movement I'm doing at any given time. So, yeah. Anyways, so regarding this, I used to have my MacBook right here, and then I use a 3.5mm jack to pass through the audio to my main computer, and then I could stream it to my hearing aids and not have to switch audio devices or anything like that. I used to use this thing for my hearing aids, but this is far more convenient because it doesn't have a battery that'll wear out over time. I don't have to worry about turning it on or off, and the battery's not going to randomly die. So that TV streamer is quite handy for my resound hearing aid. So that's basically just my audio setup right there. So yeah, until I'm done messing with my home lab stuff, or at least having test machines, and I'll be able to set up my home lab with the server for once. I have XCP&G on there, but none of my VMs are really set up right now. I'm gonna have about 5 virtual machines to suit my home lab needs. But obviously my Intel NUC is busy, so if I wanted to do some bootable USB thing right now, I could use a server for that. So I either plug it into here, or sometimes I'll use this when I have it switched over to the server, which might be more convenient. Especially if I want to hook this up to my MacBook, I might hook it up through here instead, and that works pretty well. But I have to stay on the device while it's hooked up, and I have to safely eject it if I want to make sure there's no data corruption. But if I don't want to do that, then I just hook things up directly to the server. I'm not currently on the server source right now, so let's say I wanted to do that real quick. Quickly switch over to the server in a matter of seconds. Then I can reboot this, go into my USB drive, and of course, because I am using a capture card and stuff, even though I'm using software to view my screen, I can go into the BIOS as if I'm on the actual machine, which I technically am. And it's nice because I can basically minimize my virtual monitor or anything. I'm sure you probably already saw the power in that. So I'm waiting for this to reboot. On this server, I hold F7, and I go to my flash drive, and then if I wanted to access something, I can pretty easily access whatever from here. So if I needed to do something quickly in Linux Mint, for example, then I use my Ventoid drive for that, which is what I hooked up down there. And then I can do things as I need to. Also, you probably noticed this. This is a pretty cool matrix thing. I could also do that on my main computer, as you can imagine, too. This is a situation where I want to be on my main computer, but I want the display on the NUC. I don't think a KVM switch can separate things out like that. But if I want to do a matrix on here, then I can go like this. This is a pretty cool screensaver, and this can make a pretty interesting video background. it looks so much like the real thing in the actual movie, which I think is pretty cool. I've used like a terminal matrix before in Linux, but it's not even as good as this in my opinion. And there's also pretty cool effects, which also makes it a lot like the real thing. Like there's probably some deja vu going on right there. There's that. It could do all sorts of special effects, which is a lot like the real thing. It's pretty neat. So there's my Linux Mint environment. So then I would switch back to this. So much better than manually switching the keyboard and mouse when a virtual KVM switch like barrier is not an option. Then I could just use a physical one and then do stuff as needed. Also, because I'm going through an HDMI capture card, I'm also passing through the sound and using the listen to this device feature in Windows. So I hear any sounds that go through any of these devices while I'm on it too. So that's also kind of nice too. So yeah, once I have this server set up, I'll have a few more Ethernet ports which I'll use for virtualizing PfSense. And then I can also be on a whole segregated network as well that also has access to the internet because of how the network is structured. So if I wanted to do like this whole Active Directory thing, then I can do that pretty easily with the server. Separate out the network but still give it access to the internet if I structured everything correctly. Also, I can technically hook up the Raspberry Pi to HDMI through here as well, as you could imagine, and control that. Okay, the dog is barking, and I happen to be done with this anyway, so that's it. Thanks for watching, and have a good one. Peace.